The night was wild with thunder when alarms blared across the K9 training center. A police dog had escaped. Cameras caught only a flash of fur vanishing into the storm. By morning, chaos gripped the city. Reports flooded in of a dangerous German Shepherd roaming free. A police K9 had escaped from his cage. Fear rippled through the streets. The street was chaos. People screamed and scattered as a massive German Shepherd, teeth bared, eyes wild, charged straight toward an elderly man with a cane. "Run, sir. He's dangerous," officers shouted. But the old man didn't move. He just stood there, calm, his trembling hand gripping his cane. The dog's snarl echoed through the park. And then, something unexpected happened that no one could explain. What made this man stay when everyone else ran? And what secret was buried in this furious dog's past? And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't about danger at all. It was about a promise kept beyond death. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The night was restless. Clouds pressed low over the police K9 training compound, thunder rumbling like a warning from the heavens. Rows of kennels lined the dimly lit corridor, each holding a powerful, disciplined dog trained to obey every command without hesitation. But in cage 07, something stirred. Rex, a muscular German Shepherd with eyes sharp as amber glass, paced back and forth, his breath heavy with unease. Ever since his last mission, the one that went horribly wrong, he hadn't been the same. Lightning flashed, and for a brief moment the security lights flickered. A loud crack echoed as the storm intensified, shaking the metal roof. The power grid struggled, and then, with a hiss and a spark, one of the electronic locks failed. The door to cage 07 clicked open. Rex froze. His ears twitched, tail stiff, nostrils flaring as rain began to patter against the steel. For a heartbeat, he stood still, torn between duty and instinct. Then came the smell of wet earth and freedom. He lowered his head, pushed the door with his snout, and slipped silently into the darkness. The night swallowed him whole. Outside, alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed across the facility as handlers rushed in confusion. "Rex is loose. Lock the perimeter," someone shouted over the rain. Officers sprinted toward the main gate, but it was too late. The German Shepherd was already gone, his silhouette vanishing beyond the fence into the wild storm. Mud splashed beneath his paws as Rex raced through the drenched fields, his mind a blur of fragmented memories. A voice calling his name, a man's hand on his head, a promise unfulfilled. The wind carried the echo of that memory, his handler's final words before the explosion. "Find my father." Somewhere deep inside, the loyal K9 still obeyed his last command. And as thunder rolled across the sky, Rex ran faster, away from the cages, away from the ghosts that haunted him, and toward the unknown world waiting beyond the city lights. That night, a legend escaped into the storm. Morning broke calm and golden over the city. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and glistening. In the heart of downtown, Green Ridge Park was alive with the usual morning crowd. Joggers tracing the paved paths, children laughing near the fountain, and vendors brewing hot coffee under sun-washed umbrellas. It was the kind of peaceful morning that made people forget chaos ever existed. But peace, as always, doesn't last long. Near the park's east gate, a faint rustle came from the hedges. Birds scattered. A jogger slowed, glancing toward the sound, and then froze. Out of the shadows stepped a large German Shepherd, drenched and dirty, his fur streaked with mud, his eyes wild with confusion. His badge tag still hung around his neck. K9 Rex. The jogger's breath caught. "Oh my God, that's the escaped police dog," he whispered, backing away. A second later, Rex let out a deep, guttural bark that tore through the quiet morning like thunder. Panic erupted. Parents grabbed their children. Coffee cups dropped. A woman screamed as Rex sprinted across the path, teeth bared, not attacking but desperate, searching, sniffing the air as if following an invisible trail. People didn't understand. They saw only a dangerous dog on the loose. "Call animal control," a man shouted, pulling out his phone. Others scattered toward the exits. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, police and animal rescue units rushing toward the park. Rex halted near the fountain, his chest heaving, eyes darting in every direction. The smell of humans, food, and fear filled his senses, overwhelming him. He barked again, sharp and urgent, a sound not of rage but of pain. But the crowd couldn't tell the difference. By the time officers arrived, the park was chaos. "Everyone clear the area," an officer ordered. "He's unpredictable." Tranquilizer rifles were loaded, safety pins pulled. But as the officers formed a perimeter, something unexpected happened. Rex turned not toward them, but toward a lone elderly man standing calmly by the benches, watching him without fear. And for the first time that morning, Rex stopped barking. While chaos rippled through the park, one man remained motionless. 81-year-old Arthur Bennett stood near the old stone benches, leaning gently on his wooden cane. His wrinkled face was calm, eyes fixed on the approaching dog. Around him, the world dissolved into shouts and panic, but he didn't move. The wind rustled his gray hair as he watched the German Shepherd charge down the pathway, its paws pounding the pavement like thunder. "Sir, get back," an officer yelled, sprinting toward him. "It's dangerous." But Arthur didn't hear him, or perhaps he chose not to. There was something in the dog's eyes that silenced every instinct to flee. He had seen those eyes before. Eyes filled not with hate but heartbreak. Rex slowed his pace as he neared the old man, his growl deep but uncertain. He circled cautiously, tail low, ears twitching. The crowd held its breath. Even the officers hesitated. Arthur's voice broke the silence, low and trembling. "It's all right, boy. I'm not afraid." For a moment, man and dog simply stared at each other, two souls scarred by time and loss. Arthur's grip tightened on his cane, but he didn't flinch. Something inside him whispered that this creature was not here to harm him. A flash of memory flickered in his mind. Years ago, his son in a police uniform, smiling, holding the leash of a proud young German Shepherd. "Dad, this one's special," his son had said. "He doesn't just follow orders, he feels them." That was the last day Arthur saw his son alive. Rex's breathing steadied. His body trembled, torn between instinct and recognition. Arthur's eyes softened. "You're not lost. You're just looking for something, aren't you?" The onlookers couldn't understand why the old man refused to move, why he stood so calmly before a growling K9. But something unseen bound the two together, an invisible thread stretching through grief, loyalty, and time itself. And as the sirens blared closer, Rex took one slow step toward Arthur, not as a threat, but as if he'd finally found the scent he'd been searching for all along. The park fell eerily silent. Even the sirens seemed to fade as Rex took slow, deliberate steps toward the old man. His teeth were bared, fur bristling, every muscle in his body tense as a drawn bow. But there was hesitation in his eyes. Something human, something broken. Arthur stood his ground, one trembling hand on his cane, the other slowly lifting. "Easy, boy," he whispered, his voice cracked but steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." The crowd held their breath. Officers froze with tranquilizer rifles aimed. One wrong move could end this in tragedy. Rex's growl deepened. His paws scraped the pavement as he circled, testing the man's scent. A young officer shouted, "Sir, step back now." But Arthur didn't move. He could see past the bared teeth. He saw fear, not fury. The kind of fear that came from loss. "Look at me," Arthur said softly. "You don't want to do this, do you?" His voice trembled like a father soothing a frightened child. Rex stopped circling. His ears twitched, tail lowering slightly. The world around them blurred, the shouts, the panic, the flashing lights, until only the two of them existed in that fragile space. Arthur took one cautious step forward. The air tightened. Rex's chest heaved, his nostrils flaring as he caught a faint, familiar scent, one that lived deep in his memory, buried beneath grief and gunfire. His body stiffened. His eyes locked on Arthur's face, and for a heartbeat, recognition flickered. A murmur spread through the crowd. "What's happening?" someone whispered. Arthur lowered himself a little, the old joints protesting. "It's all right," he murmured again. "You remember, don't you?" Rex whimpered, just once, a low, broken sound that silenced everyone. The rifles lowered, the tension snapped, and for the first time since his escape, the dog's rage melted into confusion and sorrow. That moment, man and beast locked in silent understanding, changed everything. The crowd stood frozen, as if time itself had stopped. Rex's low whine echoed through the park, a sound so raw it cut through every heart that heard it. Arthur's hand trembled in the air, inches away from the trembling German shepherd's face. The officers watched, fingers tight on their triggers, unsure whether to trust the fragile calm forming before them. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Arthur said a single word. Shadow. The name hung in the air like a forgotten prayer. Rex's ears perked. His eyes widened, not in threat but in memory. The growl died in his throat. He blinked rapidly, head tilting as if trying to make sense of a ghost standing before him. Arthur's eyes filled with tears. Shadow, he repeated, his voice cracking under the weight of years. That's what my son used to call you, isn't it? Rex whimpered again, softer this time, then took one hesitant step forward. His muscles still tense, his heart pounding, but his instincts, the deep, buried loyalty, pulled him closer. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Hold fire, one murmured. Something's happening. Arthur knelt down slowly, his knees trembling under his weight. You knew him, he said quietly. You knew my Michael. At that name, Rex let out a soft, mournful bark and pressed his head against Arthur's chest. The old man gasped, overwhelmed by the flood of emotion, grief, recognition, and the bittersweet comfort of something long lost returning home. The entire park went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Tears welled in the eyes of bystanders as they realized what they were witnessing. Not an attack, but a reunion. Arthur stroked Rex's head gently, his voice trembling with disbelief. You came back, all this way. You found me. The German shepherd lifted his gaze, his eyes glistening in the morning light. For the first time in years, they were calm. Not the eyes of a beast, but of a loyal soul who had finally fulfilled his last command. And in that moment, everyone knew. This was no accident. This was destiny finding its way home. A hush fell over the park as Arthur cradled Rex's head. The dog's eyes glimmered, not with aggression, but with memories clawing their way back from the darkness. Then slowly everything around him began to fade. The park, the people, the noise, until only silence remained. The flashback struck like a wave. Rex was back in uniform, his handler's steady voice echoing over the radio. Shadow, stay close. Officer Michael Bennett ran through smoke and fire, the chaos of a warehouse raid unfolding around them. Explosions rattled the walls, glass shattered, and Rex barked furiously, trying to pull his partner away from the collapsing structure. But Michael refused to leave without the civilians trapped inside. A beam crashed down. Flames burst across the floor. Michael shoved Rex toward the exit, shouting, Go, Shadow. That's an order. But Rex refused, growling, pulling at his vest strap to drag his partner free. Another blast threw them apart. Dust filled the air, and through the choking smoke, Rex heard his handler's final words, words that would haunt him forever. Find my father. Rex lunged toward the sound, but it was too late. The roof gave way, and the scene dissolved into darkness. When he woke hours later, he was surrounded by rescue crews. His partner was gone. They called him a hero, but inside, Rex was broken. He didn't understand loss. He only understood orders, and his last command was unfinished. From that day on, something in him changed. He grew restless, refusing food, staring for hours at the door as if waiting for someone who would never return. When the storm came weeks later and his cage door opened, instinct took over. He didn't escape for freedom. He escaped for purpose. Back in the present, Rex whimpered softly against Arthur's chest. And as the old man's tears fell onto his fur, the truth became clear. Rex hadn't just found Michael's father. He had completed his mission. The flashback faded like mist and reality returned. The park, the people, the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. Arthur's hand still rested on Rex's head, trembling as the old man whispered, You did it, boy. You really did it. His voice broke, rough with emotion. You found me. Rex pressed closer, his body shaking as if years of pain and confusion were finally melting away. His once wild eyes softened, filling with something far deeper than instinct, recognition, peace, and love. Arthur wrapped his frail arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the coarse fur. He didn't care that people were watching. For him, the world had narrowed down to this one impossible miracle. Around them, the officers slowly lowered their weapons. One of them muttered, He's not dangerous. Another wiped at his eyes. Even the crowd, moments ago full of fear, now stood silent, moved by the sight of a man and a dog bound by the memory of someone they both had lost. Arthur stroked Rex gently, whispering through tears, "He never left you, boy. My Michael loved you. I know he did." Rex whimpered, a low, mournful sound that made the hairs on everyone's neck stand. The K9's massive frame trembled, and he nuzzled Arthur's chest as if trying to apologize for all the years of separation. A light rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, and silver against the sunlight. The droplets glistened on Rex's fur, on Arthur's weathered hands, and for a moment it felt as though the heavens themselves were weeping with them. Arthur smiled faintly through his tears. "You can rest now, Shadow. You've kept your promise." And there, in the middle of the park where panic had reigned only minutes before, peace took its place. The lost K9 and the grieving father had found each other, and the bond that had begun with a command had ended with forgiveness. By the time the sirens faded, the park was calm again. Officers formed a soft perimeter while animal control stood by, unsure what to do next. Rex sat beside Arthur, head bowed, tail flicking anxiously. The once dangerous dog now looked like a soldier who had simply found his post again. A police captain approached cautiously, removing his cap. "Sir, are you hurt?" he asked. Arthur shook his head, still stroking Rex's fur. "No," he said quietly. "He's not a threat. He's just home." Curiosity and disbelief mixed in the air. One of the younger officers bent to read the dog's tag. "K9 Rex, missing from Unit 14, he murmured. "He vanished 2 nights ago during the storm." The captain frowned. "Then how did he end up here?" They brought over a handler from the K9 division, a woman named Officer Daniels. Rex's ears perked up at the sight of her uniform, but instead of aggression, he sat straight, alert, as if reporting for duty. Daniels knelt, scanning the microchip on his collar. When the ID flashed, her eyes widened. This was Officer Michael Bennett's dog," she whispered. "He died in the line of duty last year." Arthur looked up sharply, his breath catching. "Michael Bennett was my son," the crowd murmured in shock. Realization dawned on the officers. Rex hadn't escaped to harm anyone. He'd escaped to finish his mission. The failed lock, the midnight storm, the relentless run through the city, it all led him here. Officer Daniels blinked back tears. He must have remembered the name, the scent, the promise. She placed a gentle hand on the dog's head. "You did good, partner." Arthur smiled weakly. "He's not just a dog," he said softly. "He's family." And for the first time since his son's death, Arthur felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Rex leaned against him, calm at last. The investigation was over. The truth was simple. This was never an escape. It was a homecoming. A week later, the sun rose over a quiet cemetery at the edge of town. Dew shimmered on the grass, and the sound of distant birds filled the morning air. Arthur walked slowly down the path, his cane tapping gently against the stone walkway. Beside him trotted Rex, cleaned, calm, and wearing a fresh collar that bore a small silver tag engraved with his old badge number. They stopped before a marble headstone engraved with the words, "Officer Michael Bennett, beloved son." Hero and friend. Arthur's hands trembled as he knelt beside the grave. "I brought him home, son," he whispered. "Just like you asked." His voice cracked under the weight of grief and pride. Rex sat beside him, lowering his head, eyes fixed on the familiar name carved in stone. He let out a soft whine, the kind only a heartbroken soul could make. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay Michael's service medal, the one awarded posthumously after the raid. He placed it carefully at the base of the headstone. "This belongs to both of you," he said. "He was your partner and you were his promise." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet soil. Rex lifted his head and looked skyward, as if sensing something beyond sight. For a long, silent moment, it felt as though the bond between the living and the lost had bridged once more. Arthur smiled faintly through his tears. "You kept him alive in spirit, boy. You brought him back to me." Rex pressed his head against Arthur's knee, eyes soft, tail brushing the ground. No words were needed. Between them lay the unspoken truth, that loyalty, real loyalty, never dies. As the old man rose to leave, Rex lingered, gazing one last time at the grave before following quietly. The mission that began in fire and loss had ended in peace and redemption. 2 soldiers, 1 man, 1 dog had finally come home. Months passed, and what had once been a story of chaos and fear turned into one of healing and hope. Rex no longer lived behind bars or wore the heavy vest of duty. Instead, he spent his days in Arthur's cozy countryside home, where sunlight streamed through the curtains and the scent of old wood filled the air. The once lonely cottage now echoed with soft barks, gentle laughter, and a kind of peace that only love could build. Every morning, Arthur would take Rex for slow walks through Greenridge Park, the very place they had met. Children would rush over, their eyes wide with excitement. "That's the police dog from the news," they'd whisper. Arthur would smile proudly as Rex wagged his tail, allowing the little hands to pat his fur. "He's retired now," Arthur would say softly, "but he's still on duty, just a different kind." Soon the city invited Arthur and Rex to visit local schools. Together they taught children about courage, loyalty, and kindness. The kids listened wide-eyed as Arthur told the story of a dog who never gave up on his promise, a story that made even the toughest officers in the back of the room wipe away a tear. Rex became a living legend, not as a hero who fought crime, but as one who reminded people what loyalty truly meant. Newspapers called him the dog who followed his heart. But to Arthur, he was something simpler. "He's my guardian angel," the old man would whisper each night as Rex lay by his chair, eyes half closed, tail thumping gently. And sometimes, when the wind blew softly through the open window, Arthur could almost hear his son's voice again, calm, proud, and grateful. "Good boy, Shadow. Mission accomplished." The story ends, but the message stays. Sometimes, a dog's bark isn't a warning, it's a memory. Sometimes, an escape isn't running away. It's finding the way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because loyalty like Rex's deserves to be remembered forever.